Hi, Aaron.
Hello, Mark. How are you today?
Oh, pretty good.
Good, good. Okay, we're ready to probably get started in about, what time is it? About 5 minutes or so.
I'm kind of surprised that there are not more people here already.
I know, me too, actually. We had a decent amount of new signups. But I also figure people forgot the link, so they're frantically re-registering to to get the link.
I always put it in the calendar. That way, it not only reminds me, but I can just click on it and say,
Yeah,
join.
right. Nice.
So, how's Torus development going?
Really well. Things are on track and moving forward. Trying to think of this week. So the learning engineers come together with the development team every other week to brainstorm the latest features that will be in development. But this week we got an update as to what's been done so far and what we plan to do, and it was nice. It's a nice recap, and yeah, they're working full steam ahead, 100% on this project. So
Yeah, good. We've got a couple of potential projects coming up, and I'm trying to decide: do we go with Echo? Do we go with Torus? Or
oh yeah. So we can help you think that through. There's limited, it depends on what you want to be able to do with it, because there's limited question types at the moment. But at the same time, it's fully working. Like there are people who are using it to deliver content to students. So well, we should dig in a little more about your projects in particular and see what help you maybe decide that.
yeah. Well, one is still under development. The other one is expansion of our language courses, and uh, that those courses tend to be rather broad as far as the types of exercises we do.
Yeah, right. In fact, let me make a note to reach out to you after this meeting and schedule something with you and some other language folks to start to gather up those requirements.
That would be good. Yeah, Sebastian would probably be interested in it, and Teresa would
Yes.
also be interested.
So people are starting to come in. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. We'll give, I'll wait till about, I don't know, 12:35-ish to get started. Thanks, Sebastian. So for the folks just joining, welcome. We'll probably get started at about, I don't know, 12:35-ish, giving people time to get in to the room. We're having the funny issue we had last time with multiple Norman beers. That's fun.
It looks like that happens if you go in through the calendar link for some
Ah,
reason.
okay.
It
Interesting.
happened to me.
Before and after picture, huh? So if you're just coming on, welcome. We'll probably get started about 12:35, giving people time to come in to the room. So just wait a few more minutes. Well, it looks like we probably have who we expect. Just another minute. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to the Torus community meeting for this month. Today's topic is legacy lessons learned. Just to let you know what we mean by legacy, we're referring to both OLI delivery and the authoring environment as well. So echo and what we consider to be production. We want to consider both features of the system, and workflows that you use when you're working through with these products, and think about integration considerations, maybe things that you've tried to integrate in the past and maybe it didn't work out so well, or things that did work out so well and you want to make sure we keep those features. But also anything that you might be thinking in the future you might want to integrate. And then of course anything that supports iterative improvement. So all of that is up for grabs in terms of talking through and thinking about the features that you've used in the past or want to use in the future. Some other things to think about as we get started, because I want this to be very an open discussion. Basically, I'll be taking notes and others will be taking notes at the same time to make sure we capture everything that's said. Also, the recording will provide a good record. But we want to think about process and productivity impacts, any current workarounds that you use, really think about those and how we might want to instantiate those in the new system, any blockers that you've experienced, or even past discussions and requests that you've had with anyone at OLI about, meeting your particular course's needs. So just a reminder, last meeting Norm had presented, and I just kind of grabbed this slide from his presentation about known needs, things that we're thinking about in terms of making sure that authoring is as easy as possible, that we have that rapid publish, update, and customization, so features that allow us to publish almost immediately out to a live course, but also allow us to update and customize those courses more easily. We plan to really pay attention and give it a modern front end and framework for UI, really thinking about accessibility as well. We're already developing it to have this seamless integration with learning management systems. And in fact, right now, a lot of these features are in place where we can do essentially a push button publish right out to your LMS course. And then we want to provide as low friction as possible and flexibility with regard to the data and analytics that we want to get out of the system. We're also basing this, in the cloud, and we wanted to provide a good path to marketplace. So these are the things we're thinking about constantly as we're developing features and gathering requirements. The way I really think is the best way to structure this meeting is it's probably right now to just open it up for any comments, any things that you might be thinking, and really just taking notes. I have slides here where we can take notes with regard to specifically the delivery system, and then taking notes on Echo. But really, this can be a free-for-all. It doesn't have to be structured in this way. I'd like to see who has immediate thoughts that maybe might want to start us off. And if you guys don't have any, I'm sure the OLI team can think of some as well to get us started. So let me see. Oh, integration. I have thoughts about integration of anything other than that. So I'm going to stop this presentation just so I can start to, well, I wanted to stop not the showing of it, but the slide show of it so that I can actually take notes right in the slides. And probably depending on what we talk about, not going to be taking notes verbatim. Again, we'll have the recording to kind of help us with that. But I'm hoping that as themes start to come about, I can just capture those as summaries in the slides. So Norm, is there anything you want to add before we start to take some ideas from folks?
I just want to make sure as we start thinking about wish lists and daring to dream and avoiding blockers that we're also capturing what works, right? I mean, there is a reason that so many of you have seen success with the existing platform and its approaches. Sometimes that success has been the result of an awful lot of stretching and workarounds. But in other cases, it's because there's stuff that really is working, and I don't want to lose what works. So yeah, let us know what needs to be fixed, but also let us know, hey, don't lose this thing.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for mentioning that. So I'm still going to share my screen. I did want to do that just so we can see these notes as they're being taken. And then I don't know who wants to kick us off. Anyone feeling daring? You can just come off mute and talk. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. I mean, I'll do a round robin if I have to.
One of the things we've been talking about has been visual design. I think that we've long struggled with, on the one hand, wanting to have a consistent representation of the pedagogical constructs across the courses, while also leaving freedom for folks to be able to make and execute on design decisions. And recently, this is really, some of the challenges involved in that have really come to a head as we've tried to be more attentive to responsiveness and accessibility. And I'm wondering how you all think about striking that challenge. What are the pieces of visual design that you feel like you need to own, or appearance, I should say? What are the pieces you think should be system affordances, and how deep down the rabbit hole are you interested in going? Mark, you've been dealing with this a long time. What are you thinking about?
Well, we're sort of in our course design in the past has been a lot of presentation design where we're trying to do parallel text, parallel imagery, or definitions and explanations, which had to be adjusted in the past. As a language course, a lot of it is sort of uniquely language courses, like the conjugation tables, which I believe are now deprecated because we're the only courses that use it. At least I haven't been able to duplicate it well in Echo. And designation of foreign language text versus design level. Right now foreign is italic in one version of the browser, and it's not in another. But we want to be able to designate visually as well as conceptually things like this is English explanation, this is not the language we are teaching's format, this is things like that.
Are you referring to kind of being able to do side by side things a little bit more easily, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we at one point we were literally creating tables just for visual effect rather than content effect, and they're still in there. We have not gone back and refactored any of our courses to reflect the changes in the theme. We've just crossed our fingers and made sure that it doesn't break in the future.
Also along the lines of visual design, this is Harley. I think being able to have text wrap around pictures, because right now there's no easy way to do that.
Great, that's some good feedback. Yeah, I found myself in the past doing stuff like funky with tables just to make things fit the way I want them to and look the way I want them to, right?
On a different note for Echo, I think the Eberly team would really appreciate, I think probably everyone, like better collaboration kind of thing. So just being able to work in parallel with each other. So like 2 or 3 people could all work on the same OI module at the same time, as well as a better commenting sort of system. This way we don't have to do like our comments and changes, a change log in a separate Google Doc.
That's good feedback. I mean, kind of along the lines of that, when you're thinking about your design processes, what are things that you find difficult to do when you're trying to implement those designs in a page or in a module? Like I know the commenting feature would really help with that and collaboration. But I mean, talk a little bit more about how you guys start your designs. Are you starting in a separate document in order to have that collaboration like in a Google Doc?
Yes, really we try and leave pretty much any kind of changes into Echo on we don't do any changes in Echo unless like we basically agree upon the changes first through meetings and the Google Doc first. This because Echo is difficult to actually collaborate on, and then once a change is made, and if it's done without people knowing, then it really is never known to anyone else.
So like knowing when changes are made too is one I can.
Yes.
Yeah. Or when the last change was made, when having a date or something or some sort of timestamp to know when assets were last touched.
Norman, I don't quite understand your question, especially like kind of the second one, how that's different from the first.
So That was actually my question.
Yeah.
I just
Oh, okay. So like,
Oh yeah, we're all Norman.
I'm just looking at the chat, so I don't know.
Hi, so I'm Eli. I'm actually one of the developers. I was just curious if whenever you talk about real-time collaboration, are you explicitly talking about working within the same page, or would something like just being able to view someone else working in a page or working within a module be sufficient?
I think the most important part first is being able to actually see changes, like so maybe see a history of changes, and then and maybe like kind of a commenting system so we can tell, hey, like this part needs to be this way, or it like this doesn't seem to match with learning objectives. But otherwise, I think being able to collaborate on the same page would also be really useful.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And then I captured one here that was in the chat from Michael, needing a better solution than using, different, being able to probably designate naming and implement a naming scheme, right? Michael, you want to talk a little bit more about that? Do you mind?
This mostly has to do with the CTAT integration with old OLI and need for these special high stakes names within the name of the activity to get it to actually do the reporting.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just having to know that exists was a process in itself.
Right.
I think
Go ahead, Norm.
Oh, so just to make sure I'm hearing it correctly, this is less a question of naming convention and more ensuring a commitment to consistent and standard logging and reporting of data. That we shouldn't have to do magic things. We need to make sure that all activities are consistently logging and reporting without like having to turn it on or use a special file name. It just needs to work.
Right. That's what I'm going for. Yeah.
Great. That helped actually me realize what you were talking about. It's not just about naming things and assets. It's about apparently you have to name things a certain way in order for the data to even flow the right way, right?
Yes.
I see. Yeah, that would be a biggie.
So I might add that the way activities get automatically named is problematic. I'm assuming other people have issues with that, but when everything is labeled tutor or activity, it can be a little tricky to sort out which is which and what goes where.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree with that. And I would also love control over being able to name the IDs myself as well. Because that just kind of helps with analyzing data afterwards if I'm able to have my own naming scheme for the different skills and the different activities.
Anyone else appreciating the irony that we have a very old authoring tool that named all of the activities tutor coming from an organization where half the people in the participants list are now named Norman Beer?
That's just fun. But Zach, I agree, because one of the ways we troubleshoot the course is by looking at file names and figure out where it is in the course, and the fact that the file names are randomly generated really makes working through Echo very difficult for me once I'm trying to figure out what's going on and what's not working properly.
Certainly.
So this is Cindy. I don't have a lot of I have zero experience with Echo. I'm curious is what I know I've watched the video from the first one that you will continue to maintain support for Echo even with Torus. What sort of code sharing is there, and that these things that we're talking about for Echo will show up in Torus? I'm thinking about a lot of these naming things, especially just because of issues with data shop that we've seen. And then also as we talk about the hope of eventually logging directly to data shop, when I get I assume with Echo we'll continue to get files and data dumps, but we'll someday log directly from Torus, or I don't know. I guess we're not logging from Torus, where Torus is creating a course that will not log directly. I'm rambling at this point, but I'm wondering if the things that we're talking about here are issues that will be addressed going forward in all of your offerings, that we can start to make some changes to how we do things in data shop, that there's no special casing that's going to be necessary.
I think the tech team might be able to talk a little bit about how they're thinking about this. But I think that one of the questions that we've been bouncing around on, exploring, I should say, is what's the appropriate internal form or forms of data representation in Torus? How do we want to align with existing standards? And I think Caliper and XAPI are sort of high on that list. And how can we then integrate that in a more thoughtful way with our existing educational data infrastructure, data shop and LearnSphere? And so I think these are sort of big open questions. So there haven't been decisions on this. I think it's something that we're going to need your input on. And I frankly think, sorry if this heads in the weeds. I know for some of you this isn't interesting, so I'll try to make it short. That the distinctions between Caliper and XAPI and their adherents sometimes feel a little more like religion than like sort of carefully thought out decision making. And in as much as we are hoping to be out in front and leading with what the future of data informed educational technology can be, we think that where we land on this is pretty important. And so I'm imagining going out to the larger external community, even folks that are unlikely to be early or maybe ever Torus adopters, including the competition, to ask, look, who's doing what with Caliper, who's doing what with XAPI? How can we bring these things into closer alignment in a way that leverages the methods and tools that we have on the data side that we know are effective? Yeah. So, Eli, do you want to talk a little bit about where the data conversation has been going on inside the team?
Yeah, I can try and talk to a little bit of it. What specifically, though, I guess, do we want to drill in on? What is the short term, and what's the short term thinking about data representation and how that relates to data shop? What's already in place, and then over the long term, what are our aspirations around our data stream? So none of this is set in stone. It's all still kind of pretty fluid. But my understanding today, that from some of the conversations we've had, is we would like the data pipeline to basically be completely automated and integrated into Torus and leverage data shop for the things that it's good at. So generating learning curves and even like the visual representations and stuff, all of that would probably be done in data shop, but programmatically. And then what we would do on the Torus side is show the data and those learning curves in the right context for the learning material. So we're trying to make it as remove all of the manual processes and make it as smooth as possible, but keeping it powerful, I guess. I don't know if that answers the question or gives any insight, but
I think that's helpful. I think it's important that the fact that we're thinking about having the seamless pipeline essentially, both to and from data shop, as well as probably other applications that help with data. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with, I mean, everything you said. I think that'd be great. What little bit I've seen, you guys obviously do UI better than what we've done in the past. I was just referring to, as a part of automating the full thing, about getting the logging directly to data shop working. And then I wondered if, from what Norm was saying, is if there's hope, plan, whatever, to do it via something standardized, as opposed to, well, I guess technically the data shop logging is a quote standard at this point, but with these other offerings like Caliper or XAPI, instead of adding support for the data shop logging.
So I have a question about that, just because I don't know a lot about the standardization, the data standardization, but is there the idea that we would want to pick one and go with it, or is it one of those things where we want to have, or even have the ability to have options?
I think this is a big question on our side.
Okay.
Because both, what we think of as the two big, the two big approaches have their adherents, but no one really has critical mass, which is part of the part of the challenge, right? Neither approach has really begun to dominate the space. I was talking to someone about this earlier today, that IMS and the Caliper approach seem to think about everything as software, and that has a real impact on both how they implemented the standard and in the kinds of folks that have picked it up. XAPI thinks about everything as content, which has an impact on who picks it up and how it's implemented. Neither one of those is quite right. But by picking one or the other, and if one of them clearly aligns best with our purposes, both as educators and as researchers, obviously we should go in that direction. But if there's not a clear winner, we pick one over the other, and we end up excluding some chunk of the community. And so this is what when I say I'd really like us to get out in front of this and exhibit some leadership. I think leadership may look like we have an internal data representation that's able to stream to data shop, and that is able to be pulled out as a Caliper stream or as an XAPI stream. It may be some attempt at unifying the two, because who amongst us does not get very passionate about unifying obscure educational data standards, right? And that's what gets us excited. Yeah, I think it's early days there. So,
if it's of any note, this group that I've been working with, Innovate EDU, Caliper is what comes up all the time there. I mean, I'm sure you guys know better in terms of what everybody else is doing, but their goal, they're working with the EdTech Exchange and all that, and they're trying to pull from various sources for their work, and Caliper is what's come up, not XAPI. So I would assume, since we're labeled educational, that we would be allowed to go with Caliper instead of the more general XAPI. But I personally actually really like the idea of adding support for Caliper type stream to data shop, merging the two or whatever. But I'd have to get permission to make that. That's not my call to make.
Well, and I think, Cindy, getting your input onto this, and maybe pulling John and Ken into the conversation, because and if we're talking about exerting some leadership, I'm seeing this as leadership from Carnegie Mellon, not just from OLI.
Yeah, and I noted that we'll have to have probably more in-depth meetings just around that particular part of the system, the data logging.
Yeah, I sort of tanked your Torus community meeting, so
no, not at all.
Move on.
Hey everybody, this is Judy. I'm not sure, are we ready to move on to another topic?
You can just talk about whatever.
I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand, so
it's okay.
So when you were when you were talking earlier about collaboration tools, and again, I'm sorry I came late to the session, so I'm not sure where our focus of work is here. But I wanted to mention that we had begun working with Sebastian regarding group tools in the current system that have to do with collaborative annotation, social digital annotation, and group chat. And we have some part of that work built, but the project was paused for a little while, and we're prepared to move back on that. I don't know where that fits within the context of this, but I wanted to bring it up since you're trying to collect what I see as potentially a list of features and functionalities that you want to account for.
That's right.
So it's not authoring, well, I mean, it's probably authoring too, but it's really functionality that will be in the learning side of the house, but we'll need to support through some sort of group management. Again, some of that work has been done on the normal, in the usual authoring environment, not so much in Echo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Norm's point is, so you're talking about in the delivery side, like for learners.
Right.
Learners, teachers.
Right. And obviously there still needs to be a way to construct that. So there's an authoring component because you need to add in the things that students are interacting with or annotating when it's the social digital annotation side of things. The group chat things, they are, that's a tool that we can manage some of that upload down, review type of functionality within the tool set itself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you wanted to add more to that, Sebastian. It looks like your mic's off, but we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I have 2 mute buttons and I always forget one. Just you gotta really don't want people to hear me. Now, you bring up interesting points. I think that the one thing that it brought to my mind is exactly that, is to one, as people are authoring, so there's collaborative authoring, which is, would be a great thing to have, but also the ability to actually think about adding functionality so that these features would be, if we want to deliver collaborative activities for the students, that these features be built within the authoring system so that we don't have to go and fetch them. So if you want a document to be available for students to annotate, then it may need to be, it may not be a feature that everybody is excited about and that everybody wants to enable. So I'm not sure how that fits into the building these tools into the authoring platform, but that may be something to think about.
It's certainly something we want to capture, that's a need, and I think this comes up quite often. So thanks for mentioning that. When I start to think about, let's think about OLI delivery for a moment, and because we've done a lot of stuff so far, we've gathered some stuff around authoring and Echo, but think about delivery as well, and what sorts of things would be helpful to be able to do when you're teaching with one of these courses, like setting up a course and those types of things. Any ideas there?
I can give you an example, Erin, if that's what you're asking about. Why we even approached Judy and her team about building those tools is because we know that students learn languages better when they're able to actually create with the language, and when they're able to engage in I guess, social cognition, as a whole. And so some people may, when students read together, which was always the big fallacy of language teaching, is we told the students, well, we're going to maximize, which was in a good place, we're going to maximize class time for you to listen and speak because you have no other opportunities to do this with a live person outside of class. And then you're going to go and do reading and writing in your dorm room all by yourself. And of course, that's really difficult. But when we read with students, or when we allow them to read together, we realize that they actually can go a lot further, a lot faster, and a lot deeper when they're able to collaborate. And so and so in the current OLI language courses that we have, when we ask students to do chats, synchronous chats, the way it's currently done is they do this outside on a different platform. They use either Messenger or WhatsApp or just text messaging, and then they do screen captures, and then they send it to their instructors, which is all nice and swell, but in terms of logistics, it's very unwieldy, versus having the ability to build chat activities directly in the course so that the students can be paired and then do their chat, and it's there for the instructor to grade. Or even better than having the ability for students to chat the same way when they collaborate on reading together, the same way they would do on the Google Doc, for example, and say, hey, do you understand this word? Because I see you're online. Do you understand this? And then by the same token, having the ability to say, annotate a text or provide a definition or answer to a question, or even ask a question of any peer who is enrolled in the same class, and be able to, you know, sort of have this sort of collaborative social reading, I guess, community going on. So all of this really, so that is something that specifically we would love to have in the foreign language courses. But that, as Judy and Martin and I were in conversations, realized that potentially could apply to any OLI course, right? Because maybe other instructors in different disciplines would actually love to have these functionalities built in, and these affordances for their students. So it doesn't, I mean, it has very immediate applications for us, but I'm sure others could think for themselves in that respect.
Yeah, it is definitely something that's requested. That has been requested by others, and in fact, I've actually shared out with a couple of different folks the way you guys do it in French. I didn't even realize that tool existed for a while, that activity type. So, you know, more support for that, more robustness in that, I guess, is what I don't think would just benefit you, but benefit others as well.
When you were talking about the course setup question, Aaron, I'm not sure I understood the full question. Is it about when we're preparing to create a course? Are you looking at the administrative functions, or what was the underlying your question?
Yeah, I guess I was looking for, you know, when you're going to set up a course for students that are about to come in, like anything with that process that might either be helpful and you want us to keep, or could think of improvements to it, you know. I know we're going to defer or rather rely on a lot of LMS features as well. So thinking kind of maybe outside the box a little bit about.
Okay, I got some. You ready?
Okay.
I got one.
Yeah, I'm ready.
But you already know it. We need a more enhanced LTI functionality such that we can connect multiple modules into a Canvas course. That, you know, don't have to be all in one course. Literally, like I want to put in a sequence in my Canvas course, go to this module in OLI, it pops up. I put in another sequence, go to this module in OLI, it pops up. So that's something that would be really important, or it has been an ongoing need. And we're, as you know, we're doing workarounds for that in terms of putting it on community server, putting it here. I just had another request for it yesterday. So that's one. I think the other, I'm not sure how related this is. It may be off topic, but it's related to this conversation more generally. And again, it's not something that you're not aware of already, so I don't know if I should bring it up, but the grade book, having the grade book pass back, both, okay, you're gonna have mind blown now, both the high stakes and the low stakes. Like they want participation. The participation question still arises because they want to know, are students prepared for this course, for this class, today's class? And so having some degree of not having to go to another system, and we're talking in many of these cases, there's so many students in these classes, they need a quick view. It can't be that best scenario that we've designed for in the past where they go to the dashboard and they do this. If you've got 100 students, you need a quick glance in the system that you're using on the day that you're using it. So having the grades more meaningfully connected into the Canvas environment or other LMS environment. And those would be for both high stakes and low stakes.
Yeah, and Judy, we should probably catch you up, like have a meeting just to show you what's been in place so far, because there's some pretty robust.
Well, I saw the external thing that you've done for another company, I believe, where you can do this upload and download and sync, and that's
no, I'm talking about Torus itself is already working with a up-to-date LTI, and they've worked really hard to be able to flow grades to an LMS. So I should probably schedule some time just to show you some of those types of features and get more in-depth feedback on that.
That's wonderful.
Okay.
And I think this points to a point of emphasis for us in our development, but also, you know, what's already being revealed as a point of tension, that wherever possible, we want to defer functionality to the LMS, right? And what this means in this very specific case is that after 2 decades of developing educational technology, I hope to never develop a gradebook again for the rest of my life. I don't want to do it, right? Canvas is already doing it. There's nobody wants to do gradebooks. Let's try to integrate with Canvas's gradebook. How we make that distinction between high stakes and low stakes, and how all that plays out, you know, the devil is going to be in the details there. I suspect that, you know, there will end up being slight differences between LMS implementations, and that's probably okay, particularly if we can give faculty some choice in how they're seeing this. But it's also going to mean that it is even more important for us to drill down and be really thoughtful in what is the additional information then that we're bringing to the table, right? I think that, you know, current gradebook implementation, we had, you know, some aspirations for how we were hoping to change instructional practice and how we were hoping to support educators, and we've learned from that. And so, you know, how do we iterate on that as we think about what the next generation of additional layers of info that we can provide? And I think that, you know, in a lot of ways, that's the piece of this that is one of the things that excites me. Hopefully it still excites you, Judy.
Yeah, absolutely. Lynn, is Lynn still here? Is there functionality that you've been requesting lately that you can't get? I don't see. I'm not sure if she's here. There she is.
I'm here.
Any functionality like along the lines of maybe the LTI connection or other kinds of things that people have been requesting and want to start to configure in terms of, I don't know, OI modules?
I don't know. I think the one I get the most is about collecting data. People want to see their data.
Okay. And back to collaboration. Thanks, Lynn. Back to the collaboration thing then, and connecting the dots among these things. I think managing groups between environments. Can we get Canvas groups to populate into, you know, OLI or vice versa, whatever the case may be, and then, you know, handle that in some way. I know we have a glitch right now in terms of LTI's external tools, but that would be something I think would be worthwhile working on.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that's another place where we're saying, yeah, let's defer to the LMS, right? You know, you're already comfortable building groups in your LMS. All of that should get carried forward and should be available to Torus to be able to do grouping, whether that's for assignments, whether that's for reviewing grades. And yet this is also, as you just alluded to, it's also pointing us to a place where we are going to be pushing the boundaries of what can be done via LTI. And hopefully sometimes that means we're going to be pushing back at IMS and getting them to expand the standard. but it also means we are occasionally going to be wanting to do things that just aren't possible in the current. So, you know, if you're using groups and group sets and you're trying to use LTI, Canvas is like, whoa, we don't support that. And I think over the long term, you know, the folks that are interested, which is the folks who are showing up today, right? Helping to inform where we draw the line and say, yeah, we need to code around this problem or create other affordances versus, you know what, if the LMS can't support it, we can't support it either, is going to be a challenge, right? I mean, it's almost a governance question.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thinking along those lines, though, when you start to think about when you set up your course, being able to manage groups, what about things like scheduling? I'm trying to just think of other functionality that's part of
scheduling, gating on different criteria.
For scheduling, sort of, and especially for gating, like precondition requirement, I would love to see the ability for an instructor to turn it on or off for their course, to make it optional, because we have two of every organization, one with preconditions, one without. And it would be nice to just have the organization and say, you can require the practice problems or not, you just tick a box. Because the way we use the preconditions, we have practice lab exercises and then the turn it in for credit assignment for each chapter. And we have two versions, one where you can just do any problem anytime, and the other where in order to unlock the 4 credit assignment, you have to do the practice problems first. Not everyone uses that. Not everyone wants that, especially the more self-paced people. And so they go for the non-preconditioned version. And then we usually have used the preconditions because, at least in my experience, you get better homework results when you make the kids do the practice. But not everyone wants to require that. So if we could just turn that off with a switch somewhere, or even have individual student exceptions, so that when you do have the preconditions, but you have an advanced student catching up, they did half the course already and they just need to, you know, fill out the homework for the first half of it, sort of thing. So if you could fit that into the exceptions, just like you do for the due dates and all that, that would be fantastic. And I'll stop talking now because that's all I had to say. Thanks.
Well, Dawn, you brought up something else in the meeting that we had this week about submitting things too, not to put you on the spot, but.
Oh yeah, that was more about how the lab works and can we get an offline application to submit results to the grade book, whatever it may be. So submit to the scoring daemon, I guess, and then the scoring daemon would do whatever they're supposed to do with it, whether it's send it to Canvas or something else.
Yeah, thanks for speaking to that.
Thanks.
Sure.
So there's an interesting piece sort of underlying this, and it's popped up in a couple of earlier discussions as well. There's a broader conversation to be had about sort of the philosophy that guides how OLI develops courses and how we imagine those courses to be used. And I think that there is a decent chunk of infrastructure in the system that was put in place to ensure a high degree of fidelity to the original authoring team's vision of the course, right? You know, that I want to make sure that students do this, and then they do this, and then they do that. And I think as we've continued to see these courses being used in more and more contexts and by larger populations of faculty in different ways, we're often seeing that kind of strict enforcement is less desirable, right? That folks are, you know, particularly if we want to see greater use, we want to see scale, that you know, our external collaborators are demanding a greater degree of control over things like gating, or, you know, when or sequencing. And I know that I personally have moved on this, on you know, my sense of what's appropriate on the spectrum to encouraging that, to saying, no, we do need to build a system that allows for greater adopting faculty autonomy, and even if that means deviating somewhat from the initial vision of the course, because that's what's going to facilitate learning, that's what's going to facilitate appropriate content management. Dawn, I sort of just heard you saying the same thing, and if I'm putting words in your mouth, tell me to shut up. But, you know,
there are some aspects of our course design that we want to be respected no matter what. Like, we were talking the other day about the order of chapters. There are dependencies, and the dependency stuff got into the XML but never got fully implemented and used online. So being able to actually have that work and say, no, if you want chapter 5, you need to have chapter 4, because the stuff in chapter 5 doesn't make any sense. But that being said, you know, chapters 6 and 7 could be done in either order, or 6 can be left out entirely, and things like that. But then to say what's right for a highly respected research university demanding of their undergraduate students is not necessarily the same thing a community college is going to do. Especially now with all the remote learning, it really depends on your student population, and your instructor is going to know more about that than the course designer, because we can't know everything about everyone. And working in that wiggle room for instructors, however we can do that. So we provide our suggestions and our recommendations, and then we give possibilities beyond that. And it would be nice if it were easier for people to choose those options, instead of what we do usually is building courses for instructors. We do have one version that has become very popular, and that's out publicly on the course builder since quarantine started. But aside from that, there are lots of options, and even just explaining them to people can get complicated. But so however we can make it easier to choose options in how the course is delivered, how it works, what features are and are not used, instead of proliferating organizations and making it impossible to update our course without Raphael having to come in and like work some kind of literal magic on it. Eugene usually starts and ends up having to ask Raphael for help with some tricky thing that's not working properly for anyone but Raphael, because our stuff is big and bulky and complicated. And so if we can get rid of some of the bulk and some of the complication by making more instructor-based options instead of proliferating organizations, I think that would be great for everyone, including making the strain on the system of keeping things updated and just deploying in general. I think that would all be good.
Yeah, I think
Raphael might get a vacation.
Right.
Yeah, we're 100% aligned there. I think that one of our guiding, both in Raphael, you know, and Jean being able to take their vacation authentically, but one of the, you know, there is a series of things that we sort of have plugged in as foundational guiding principles to Torus development and architecture, and one of those is if we're in the places where we're letting faculty members and adopting instructors customize and make decisions, let them do it without further intervention, without further support. The system needs to support them in being able to make those choices. What those choices are still up in the air. But yeah, I think that Yeah.
And I think another important aspect of this, and in fact, Hal and I were just talking about this, I think earlier today, is if you can't kind of connect everything to where, like, if someone removes a learning objective or a piece of content, you know, that has rippling effects in the assessments and the formative activities as well. Being able to, if you can't like remove all of that as one thing, at least note what you're doing when you decide to remove some piece of content, or and be able to, you know, have the person who's making those selections know the implications of that in other aspects of the course.
Our exams, because they have expectations about what chapters have been looked at and done.
Right.
And so if somebody wants to omit chapter 6, there aren't many implications for us. But a few of the questions on the exam become mysterious.
Right.
Because their parent chapter is missing. And so there, we can't really take stuff out of the syllabus without needing a new exam for it. But most people tend to use all of sentential or all of predicate or just sentential and not omit those chapters. So that's how we've gotten around it. And I have on occasion worked with people to create custom exams, but that means a whole new organization or some kind of special update of an organization that no one else is using right now.
Yeah.
And all sorts of weird workarounds like that we've done over the years. Being able to make portions of the quizzes dependent on whether or not a chapter exists would completely dissolve that concern, because then you omit chapter 6 and one page of the final exam goes away, or one page of the midterm exam goes away, and there's no problem. You don't have to adjust your total. You don't have to tell your kids to avoid page 3. Nothing like that. It just all works. It flows. And that would be so sweet.
Yeah, so that leads me to start to think about skill tagging and the process that we undergo to make sure that assets are tagged to specific skills and learning objectives. So I just want to throw that out there as another aspect of our both authoring and delivery, that, like, how does anybody have any ideas around that?
I was actually just thinking the same thing, Aaron. Based on what Dawn said, one thing, you were asking for things that OLI does well, and I do like the skill tagging and how you can put things under relevant learning objectives. But maybe if you could also see
intervene that we haven't really bothered because it doesn't speak to our way of using it. But if it worked to do these things, we would add it for sure. And I'll stop now.
Right. And I think if you could also see the relevant skills for each section of a module or a quiz in the course builder. So like not just in Echo, but as I'm building a course in the course builder and adding and removing different modules, that way I can make sure, okay, I can see that there are these skills in this quiz at the end, but I don't have any modules that cover those skills. Not as slick as automatically removing the questions and things, as Dawn was saying, but it might be a bit easier to see.
Right. That's the kind of what Hal and I were talking through this morning. Like, ideally, we want to say if you're removing this and it just automatically removes everything, tagged with that. But in the interim, if you can't do that, at least notifying the person, like, here's what will be impacted when you want to make this decision, right?
In order to increase instructor awareness, you could maybe have it that the instructor view only disables it when they look. As opposed to removing it from the instructor and the TA.
Right. So it keeps it in the forefront of the instructor to say, look, you this is what you did.
Yeah, this content is not included based on your syllabus, but is available if you do X. Or, you don't even have to put the if you do X. Just, they'll figure it out. But if you don't know that there's a page that's been omitted, you can't change your mind and say, no, I do want that. I didn't realize that was included in that option or whatever, so that you could see the way it filters through.
That's interesting. I like that idea too.
And it's worth noting here that when we talk about skills mapping, you know, in a lot of ways, what we're talking about is trying to come up with some different mechanisms for capturing the knowledge representation and pedagogical intent that's happening inside of OLI courses. And we have some very practical reasons for doing this. It helps with course design. It helps, it is what drives some of our analytics. We have some things that we hope it will do a better job of in terms of helping to more, you know, to provide better guidance around course design in terms of, you know, being able to show you missing skills, being able to show you some other elements, being able to take advantage of things like learning curves and data shop. But the other goal of the OLI project is to be able to drive research, to be able to drive new kinds of approaches. And so I think that what effectives, one, that you know, when we talk about a skills map, in reality, where we need to be headed over the next 5 years is being able to support multiple kinds of skills representation, right? There's probably not one right way to capture the knowledge that's represented in a course. And then to be able to test out different kinds of tools and provide different kinds of functionality. And so I want to make sure that we don't miss those pieces, right? That is, we're imagining what Torus can be. You know, we've ended up sort of having a fairly rigid concept of skills and learning objectives within the current platform. And we've seen a couple of places now where that's ended up being limiting. And so I think we also want to imagine, what does a future world look like when we might have more than one skills map or a skills web or something that isn't a map, but that is a, you know, completely new approach. Because that's also the stuff that, you know, we should be excited about, right? That's
for sure. And on like that note, being able to like implement different forms of mastery learning based on different skills models that we're using kind of as the students are going through the course.
And yeah, and so and obviously we're never going to get all of this stuff out of the gate, right? In fact, we're going to get a very small set. And so really knowing all of the things that we hope to long-term support is really, you know, this is part of where this conversation needs to, you know, help guide the architectural decisions that are going to make that easier or harder. Yeah, so thanks a lot for taking First Friday in the new working year to, you know, spend this time talking with us and engaging with the community.
Yeah, it's so important. So anything else you guys can think of along that? For those of you who don't use skill tagging currently, like what kept you from that? What was hard about that? Or and are there ways that you've thought of that we can make that easier? I know you're out there.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Why didn't we do it? I think it's just because the granularity of it was a little nutty. Like you
intimidating, maybe?
Yeah. Like it would be nice if you could start out maybe some sort of a family tree for skills. Like the big skill is, you know, being able to do derivations. And that breaks down into knowing a whole bunch of different individual rules. But there are some things that speak more directly to the top of the tree and not so much specific individual bits. Like I don't want to have to go through and label, I think we have something like 500 problems in total, each one with the rules we expect students to need to use in them as skills, but simply be able to finish the darn thing.
Yeah, I think this might be a actual UI block right now, maybe a barrier of sorts, at a minimum piece of friction. If I'm recalling correctly, and I don't go into Echo every single day, so forgive me if I'm not, you've got the learning objectives where you enter those, and then you've got the skills, and you're not connecting to the learning objectives through the skills interface. You actually have to type it in again. So oftentimes when we're consulting with folks, if we don't get in the first pass down to the skill level, We just put the learning objective in there. But if you're operating on your own without that consultation resource, it's possible that you're not even thinking, you're really wanting just to connect back to the learning objective you've already described. So I don't know if that could, maybe that's the thing that's stopping, because literally you could just connect to your learning objectives and in the next iteration start to unpack. As you see students are having difficulties, it starts to become more clear what are the skills that they're struggling with. And then you start to identify those skills and attach them or add problems, practice problems. So it might be as simple as that in the current interface, but I resonate with the problem more generally. I do think it does oftentimes take consultation services to help the expert to unpack to the skill level.
Yeah, we ran into that with French. We started doing our skills mapping before ECHO, and we had a several thousand line spreadsheet that matches all the skills and learning objectives and tying them all together. And we ended up having to basically tear it apart and simplify everything.
We don't use ECHO because our content was so fully done by the time it was introduced. And there are interconnections in our content between presentation and lab files and whatnot that ECHO doesn't understand, and so we don't use it. So
yeah, same here.
Stuff in there I'm not familiar with at all.
You know, this bulk tagging, sorry, no. I just want to capture this idea of this bulk tagging because it really links, I think, to potentially another piece of functionality. And I'm mentally mapping it to, what do you call it? Question pools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, and that's often, I don't remember what the functionality is for question pools currently is. But I do think it's an important aspect and potentially connected to this bulk mapping because it could be a way to do it as well.
Yeah, and I think what this is surfacing is some very specific challenges in our most mature courses, particularly with skills mapping, right? You know, this is, I mean, but look, when you're talking about, I have thousands of problems. I mean, the mechanisms that we have for skills mapping, whether the earlier spreadsheet or the newer ECHO, yeah, I mean, you're totally right. Like they weren't designed to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And there is the interface piece of this, like, you know, how do I connect this problem with this skill? But then there is the intellectual work of being able to look at a set of problems and say, yeah, these are actually assessing or teaching this skill. These are assessing or teaching this learning objective. And I know that there are a lot of folks in on the educational data mining and ML side that are experimenting with some ways to do some automated preliminary skills mapping, you know, under the notion for some of them, this would be a labor-saving device that is not going to be perfect, but it gives you a first cut of things to review. And for others, you know, I've heard Ken express the position a few times that he's increasingly convinced that we should, you know, take that rather than spending lots and lots of human energy at building out a skills map that may be wrong, we should let the data tell us what the first cut of the skills map is. And so I wonder if there are approaches there that as we gain confidence in them, these also get integrated into Torus to try to make this easier and more straightforward. So technology can help at some point, I hope.
Yeah, I think to that point, Norm, you know, the idea that to be able to tag to kind of various levels, because, you know, we want to let the data tell us where maybe more skills or less skills are needed, but we also need the ability to do a good first pass, right? And so allowing something in between that good baseline or what we think the model is, and iterating on it and be able to easily iterate on it as we get more data, I think is the key to making this super robust. So yeah, see, I knew you guys would have a lot to say about skill tagging. So I don't know, thinking through some other aspects of the system, you know, it's been brought up, this idea of organizations. So I kind of want to, this hasn't really come up in some of the discussions we've had to date. But I would love for, you know, just a few minutes to kind of envision or, you know, talk through, like, is this idea of how we have multiple organizations with the same content, is it working? Is there times where you've been working with it? I know, Dawn, like you said, you've used organizations, I think, to their fullest in order to provide different flavors and different aspects of the course. Is that something that's still needed? I assume it is.
For us, definitely. At present, if we got to a point where everything from what fee amount is associated with each portion of content, what preconditions will be used, dependencies, if all of these things were put together, we could probably just do with one organization that said, here's what the stuff is, here's the order we prefer it in, here are the restrictions on how you can shuffle it around to your own preference. Like, if we could bundle all that up in one organization, we really only have the one organization. It's just all these little details that proliferate the differences. But if fees could be attached like content as opposed to the organization, then a sentential logic only thing, we wouldn't need to make an organization for that, because half the fee would be associated with that, half with the other half of the content. And if you took out the one piece, the fee for it would go away and you'd automatically get the right thing for the package you've built. If you could do all of these bits together, we would only need one, maybe two organizations.
Right, so kind of maintaining the idea of being able to mix and match the content in different ways, but maybe not doing it like kind of in a hard-coded way through the organization, but more of a dynamic way through the, I mean, you'd probably have to tag and note the material though, pretty.
So the way I do it, I have a master organization that spells out every piece of content. Actually, I have two copies of it, one with preconditions, one without. It spells out all of the content in the order. It's got the dependencies in there, even though they're not used, and all of this. And then I build course organizations using references to portions of my master list. Wow. So it's sort of like what the master organization is, sort of like the pantry, and then the organizations are the recipes. Mm-hmm. We could just do with the pantry and, you know, here's what is involved in taking this out of the pantry for an instructor. If that were built in, we'd only need the one. Here's everything we've got to give you, and what and how you take it out has some rules about it, but go nuts. Mm-hmm. And then we wouldn't need to proliferate a bunch of organizations, although it would be nice to specify some defaults.
Right, yeah.
In our language courses, our organization splits are basically divided on the instructor engagement. We've got a full course where the instructor actually has elements to grade in exercises in the lesson tests. We have another version of that where anything the instructor had to grade is removed. And then we have another version where it's designed as not having to have an instructor for individuals.
Okay. That's good to know, because I think that's a common approach too. Judy, you were like, yes, in the chat.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing away with organizations. I hear what Dawn is saying. So it's the idea of organizations, how that functionally takes place. I'm sure can be tweaked. But I think Mark also expanded on that similarly. Yeah, organizations are something we use all the time to help tailor the content to the use case. So. I don't know, maybe Zach or Lynn or Harley have additional comments on organizations, how they're used.
I think that just keeping organizations is definitely needed. It's useful for both, like free and fee classes for kind of testing purposes. Yeah, I think they're useful to have.
That's great. Good feedback. Let's see what else. So there's organizations. Now next, giving you kind of a little bit about the next meeting. We're going to start really digging in on learning dashboard functionality. So you guys can start thinking about that, but we'll save that for that meeting, and probably I know right now in the schedule there's 2 meetings just around learning dashboard, because I made the assumption that there'd be a lot to say about that, and probably even some guided, looking at a dashboard and figuring out what's helpful to see, what isn't, and start to gather more detailed requirements around that. So I'm going to save that for another time, another meeting. So we've covered a lot about delivery functionality, such as scheduling, gating, roster controls. We've covered echo authoring. How about anything around maybe media? We have 10 minutes left to the meeting, but I'm sure we could find some things to talk about media.
You can always use 360 video.
I'd just like to touch base real quick on media.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, love the idea of connecting to YouTube, because all of the authoring functionality is there. The service is going to be there. I can't imagine for how long, hopefully forever. And its relationship to the complexity of authoring to accommodate digital accessibility. When you start to add other tools, whatever it is, it's connected to a digital accessibility authoring component. And so the fact that YouTube has all these affordances, it's not perfect, no tool ever is, and that it itself is, upkeeping the management and maintenance of that authoring environment and delivery system is important. Now, the other piece of that is managing FERPA compliance. So the more we do these remote courses and things like that, there has to be some guidance and assistance around making sure that privacy is managed and upheld. So the periphery services is what I'm trying to get at around media and managing. And so that's why I think using these platforms instead of building our own and trying to accommodate, like I think we need to think about the ecosystem of authoring and what we have to account for when we're managing media, multimedia for learning, and student learning and all that particular ecosystem of use.
So I heard a couple different things there, Judy. I heard that YouTube works great, and let's keep, using that. But I wasn't quite sure if you were suggesting we need to build more of those type of capabilities into our system, or just be, more conscious and aware of maybe what services we might want to pull into our system.
I think it's B.
Okay.
I think where we add to our system is in potentially the educational wrapper around those things.
Mm-hmm.
So reminding people, is there student information in the video, just helping them to manage the issues around that to make it secure and safe for everyone using it. But also just recognizing when we're building this platform, to Norm's actually comment earlier, I don't ever want to build another grade book. Let's use the affordances of the tool systems out there that already manage these components so that our work in developing a platform really is meaningful and situates it, the effort situates it in this CMU's special sauce kind of a thing, as opposed to reinventing other environments that already carry that load. So YouTube, you can get the automated captioning, but it's never perfect. So you do have to go in and manually, but that's for almost every tool currently. That's the state of the technology. You can, the idea that now, one thing that I'm not sure that YouTube does better than, like, for example, the TED Talks do really well, where you can click down, you can see the transcript and click to that area. That's a thing that is really, really nice. And so I can't remember if YouTube does that or not, but knowing the functionality that's required in the learning, the use of multimedia for learning is really important. And then securing that ecosystem, especially if you're linking out to these tools, right? You're embedding tools.
Yeah, our video, we have extensive audio and video in our courses. The changeover towards YouTube has made us reconsider some of the videos that we use, simply because we don't have the granularity to be able to start and stop the videos at the close to precise points we used to have when we were directly feeding the videos from the OLI servers. I think YouTube's granularity is somewhere around a half second, and we were down to less than a tenth of a second, and still having problems with simple syllables that were leaked in and out and causing confusion. Also, we do a lot of subtitling, and the subtitling needs to be not only associated correct, with the correct subtitles, precisely the way the authors are stating the transcript, but it needs to be tied in exactly to when it's speaking, not the half second that automatically generated subtitles, or half second or more of a delay. And it needs to be able to be as well chunked as the video is in the courses that we're using that don't use YouTube.
So I think what I heard there is that, the switch to using YouTube is great, except you had more granularity and control over when to start and stop the videos when they weren't YouTube, when they were directly embedded in OLI. And so maybe some combination of, being able to use YouTube, but also having some media controls would be helpful.
Yeah. There are a couple of instances where, even though I personally have been reluctant to even consider it, some of the authors have been thinking of actually video editing out the segments they want, which is what we did in the very beginning, where we would have 15 segments for a dialogue just so we could do the proper chunking. And that's not useful. With QuickTime, we used to be able to do it within 300ths of a second, and you get that precision in with both subtitling and the chunking.
Okay.
One thing to think about, maybe also in that, and that maybe just a modern language problem when using video, and I love the idea of having access to a transcript. I know pedagogically, people like having both the ability to subtitle and caption, and to have that being able to be toggled on and off, right? Because sometimes you do want students to be able to try to make sense of what they view without any visual aid, but you also may want to be able to allow them to then toggle on the caption first, after they've tried once. Or maybe you want that to be the default in your course, that all videos will be captioned, right? So these are things to think about, and maybe in terms of functionalities in the authoring side of things. Is how do we make this happen?
Sebastian, I think you have pushed back on this, but I think you have an actual legal constraint here for digital accessibility. If somebody, so maybe there's a way around that. I just want to.
So that's a really good example. So, you know, people who do have accessibility issues may be able to have it on all the time, for example. Right. And the same thing with that accessibility issue was also the case with pictures. So this is really important.
Yeah, with the YouTube embeds, and I don't think I'm fully understanding Mark's or your use case, so we can ignore it. We don't have to dive in so far, but I think with the YouTube embed, you know, you always have the ability to have all of those controls available to the end user. What I hear you saying, though, if I understand it correctly, is that the author, the instructor, can choose when to release that toolkit to the students. Is the player available and can they do it? And so that's where I was trying to bring up, and maybe I'm misunderstanding. So that's all I wanted to make sure that when you embed in a YouTube video, you get the full tool set in terms of the player controls, including the captioning and everything. Yeah, so I don't know if I'm missing a point that you're trying to make.
Well, it's just that, like, I think that it's the time marker, right? So when you or even with the slider and how close you can get to restarting an utterance, for example, right before it starts for dialogue completion, for example, and these types of exercises. And when you have access to the actual file, then you can really get it to like replay from a very, very specific point that, you know, and sometimes in between sentences or for a specific word, YouTube doesn't really give you that granularity where you're replaying the entire sentence or segment, or you're halfway through a sentence and so on and so forth, right? So in terms of the timer, I think is the time marker is where the issue is, I think.
Okay.
And I believe we've put that kind of control in Echo. I think it exists already. So if that's the case, it certainly will be the same, but we'll probably dig in a little more to think about this a little more deeply even too. And of course, when we meet with you, Sebastian, and Mark, and others in the languages, we'll probably have a whole, you know, list just for you guys in terms of things you're looking for and things you don't want to see, keep that we keep. So we're at time, so that's a good transition into saying, you know, this isn't the end of the conversation. We have these meetings monthly, and let me see, I think I didn't put the link to the Torus community page, but I could probably grab that pretty quickly for you guys. Give me a second. And you know, please come to the next meeting. But I also was thinking, you know, these types of meetings probably spark other things to think about even beyond the meeting. And so I want to, as you guys were talking, I was thinking of a way that we can still capture any ideas and thoughts that you have, or even questions around Torus development. And so I was thinking, just off the top of my head, that I would put together maybe some sort of Google form or you know, a document or something in place where you, as you have ideas, you know, you don't have to save them for these meetings. You can just put them somewhere for us to review and maybe even come back with more clarifying questions and things like that. So I'm going to certainly think about what the best approach to that is, and I will follow up with all of you to let you know what that is. But in the meantime, if you can make sure you keep jotting things down as you think of them, so that when we have that in place or when we talk to you, by all means, we want to hear it. So just know that. I just put the link to the community page in the chat. And so, you know, please feel free to go and keep and see what other meeting topics we're going to be having next. And so glad to have you guys here and giving us this feedback. And it's so nice to see the investment of your time and in your care for how this is going to go. And we certainly want to take that seriously and incorporate it into our development. So thank you. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. And yes, great to see you all. So have a great weekend, and till next time, or until you hear from me about a place to put some more thoughts and ideas.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.